Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Wellington Shire Council on this 16th of June 2020. By way of opening, as the COVID-19 social distancing requirements remain in place, the Minister for Local Government has issued the Minister's Good Practice Guideline MGPG-1 virtual meetings pursuant to Section 87 of the Local Government Act 2020. These guidelines ensure that local government decisions making can continue in line with COVID-19 requirements, and further details can be found on the Local Government Victoria website. These guidelines take effect from the 1st of May 2020 and will remain in place through the 1st of November 2020. Whilst members of the public can no longer attend meetings in person, we have provided options for you to interact with us virtually via our council meetings page on the Wellington Shire Council website. You are also able to interact with council in two ways. Email through a specific question or comment related to a particular council agenda item. That was to be no later than 1 p.m. on the day of the council meeting, or for general communication with council via the webcasting chat room early in the meeting to ensure that your submissions can be dealt with at the end of the meeting. While we face a new way of gathering, we thank you for your continued support. Look forward to a new way of keeping in touch with all Wellington Shire, and can we request that all mobile phones and devices be turned off for the duration of this meeting. And given the restrictions, there is no need for us to stand for the acknowledgement. And so we acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Gunai-Kurnai people, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon the Wellington Shire Council, councillors, officers, staff and their families. We pray for your guidance in our decision making so that the true good of the Wellington Shire Council may result to the benefit of all residents and community groups. Amen. Amen. Do we have any apologies, CEO?
No formal apologies, Mayor, but I do note that Councillor Stevens hasn't joined us yet, so as soon as he comes to the meeting, we'll note at that time.
I should note that we should, in fact, conduct with a roll call as well, just to establish that we have everybody at this moment, apart from Councillor Stevens, in the room. So just rotating. Councillor Crosley.
President, and I can hear you.
Councillor Cubbin.
Present, and I can hear you.
Councillor Marr.
Present, and I can hear you.
Councillor Ripper.
Present, Mayor, and I can hear.
Councillor Hole.
Present, Mayor, and I can hear. Also, is the agenda going to be run through on the screen?
That's a really good question. Let me let's get to that. Councillor Bye.
Present, and I can hear you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I understand Councillor Stevens is now with us as well.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I can now hear too. Thank you.
So I think that's everyone. So we have
I'm here as well, Councillor.
Rossetti. Did I miss you, Councillor Rossetti?
It's me. I'm present and I can hear you.
A mere oversight on my part, be assured of that. Okay, now back to Councillor Hole's question in that process. Do we have the agenda displayed? Is that our standard practice? Just confirming.
Yes, Mayor, it is.
And is that available at this stage?
It should be, Mayor. I will check and I'll get back to you immediately.
While we're waiting on that, we have no apologies. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest?
No, Mayor.
We're noting that the agenda is still not up on the window. You have to wait a moment, councillors, or move on until we get that up. I'm in your hands.
Mayor, given the first item is probably going to have a number of speakers, I suggest that we move on. But if it gets to a point where any wording gets changed and we need to see the motion on the screen, then we could pause at that time.
If I may, Mayor, the agenda is displayed on the live stream, so anyone who's watching the council meeting will be able to see the agenda.
Okay, I know that I've got that. I've got it up on my second screen, but I don't know.
I don't have it.
Okay. I think that's the way. Is that the way we normally done it? I'm a bit concerned.
Yes, that's the way we normally do it, Mayor.
Okay. We might move on then to confirmation of minutes of the previous council meeting. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Mayor. I move the Council adopt the minutes and resolutions of the ordinary Council meeting of the 2nd of June 2020.
That's seconded, Councillor
And
Marr.
I'm happy to support that. Yes.
Seconded, Councillor Marr. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Moving on to item A5, business arising from previous meetings. Is there any such matters, CEO?
None, Mayor.
Thank you. There are, as I understand it, no late items, CEO.
None, Mayor.
We move on then to item A71, Macmillan Cairns. Councillor Crosley.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Hull.
Mr Mayor, my understanding that there was a planned Skype meeting of 5 councillors and the CEO last Friday in relation to this notice of motion. It appears that up to 4 councillors were not invited to attend. My point of order is, where is the process that allows for an assembly of councillors in relation to this notice of motion when only select councillors are invited to participate? Or in the alternative, if the meeting was not an assembly, and I dispute that, where is the process that provides for some councillors to meet and potentially strategise with the administration in relation to a notice of motion?
My response to that, Councillor Hull, is
and for the record, please, Mr. Sorry, who called the meeting, who attended, and what was the outcome decided from this meeting?
well, let's take this one thing at a time. In fact, I believe that where 3 or more councillors with an officer in attendance do assemble, that in fact does in fact be an assembly of councillors. And as a result, that such meeting will be reported in the standard Assembly of Councillors report, which will come to this council in the ordinary course of business. I understand that's the standard practice. I understand that that the meeting was called by Councillor Crosley, and I would understand that she's had the right to, in fact, invite councillors as to meet with her as she saw fit in regard to this matter, and that's what occurred. And that in terms of the reporting of this particular meeting, that it will appear on the next report in regard to Assembly of Councillors, as the report of Assembly of Councillors in this agenda, in fact, does not go up to the date in question. So I think that's addressed that issue.
For the time being.
So in terms of that, we will move on to now back to item A71, Macmillan Cairns, Councillor Crossan. Now, I understand that we have a number of people who wish to speak to this motion, and we have some assembled now down in the Merriman's room. And on the basis of process, we will first proceed to get comments in regard to the matter. The people who are assembled to speak to this have an allocation of some 3 minutes, and I understand, and just checking my list, which I have now misplaced, which I've now found, I understand that we have first up Grattan Mullet from Glawak, who's General Manager Culture, and there may be a delay while we in fact arrange for him to join the meeting. So bear with us while that occurs.
Hello, Grattan speaking.
Grattan, it's Alan Hall. Welcome to the meeting.
Oh, thanks, Alan.
Just in the normal course of business, what we would normally do in regard to participation in the meeting, that people who wish to speak to an item, that we normally allow about 3 minutes, and it's clearly these are not Q&A sessions, but rather just simply to hear any submission that you wish to make in regard to the item being considered. So we are now in your hand.
Okay, sure. So I'll be quite brief in my presentation in support of Councillor Crosley's motion tonight, as you would all be aware. So good evening to you all. Let me begin by just acknowledging and paying my respects to our ancestors of the land, the Barraparan people, to our elders, past, present and future leaders, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living and working on Gunnar country, as we honour our tireless and ongoing commitment towards achieving true self-determination, justice and cultural identity. My name is Grattan Mullet Senior. I'm a proud Gunnar man, General Manager Culture with the Gunnar Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation, also known as GLAWAC. Our people were dispossessed from our traditional lands, forcibly removed and massacred at the hands of the early colonisers. As you would be aware, the Macmillan cans represent a celebration of history of a man who arrived in Gunnar country and committed forms of genocide. We understand that he also did some good things for the new colony that we now know as Gippsland. The symbolism of these cans to us is significant in the form of their recognition of the early pioneers, but it is also an issue that has been clearly on our community and on our agenda for many decades. We are happy to discuss the best way forward with the Wellington Shire Council about these cans and to ensure a more respectful, appropriate recognition of Gunnar culture and history, including European history occurs. As a starting point, the removal of the two cans will be a great symbolic step towards reconciliation. Our board chair stated last week, and I quote, "We are prepared to engage in respectful dialogue, explore ways that the true history of our region can be shared with the wider community." GLAWAC is working responsibly with all arms of government to achieve strength-based positive outcomes to help the healing required for Aboriginal people of Gippsland through management of country, cultural heritage protection, and education and economic empowerment. We also note GLAWAC are currently working collaboratively with your Shire on many matters and wish to continue to build on this relationship. The Gunnar people have no ill feelings towards current community members' views, with whom the majority also feel human atrocities should be called out and addressed. We believe it is now the time to take the next step forward in building a positive and cohesive Gippsland community that embraces our First Nations history. And we look forward in taking action to achieve this. We look forward to your support in a process that will bring healing and greater unification to our region. So that was my brief response in support of the motion that's been put to Council tonight, and that response is basically the GLAWAC support for that motion. So that's our response, which was given to me to provide to the Council's meeting tonight. Alan?
Thanks, Grattan. Appreciate you taking your time and putting that position clearly to us. So I'm grateful that you're here to be able to do that. I understand we have now more people available in the Merriman's room to, in fact, make presentations. So if we can just, I'm sure staff down there have got that organised. So we will have someone next, I imagine, shortly.
Sure, no worries. Did you want me to stay online or
no? Okay. No, thanks, Grattan. Thank you very much. There's no need for that, I'm sure. So thank you. Just waiting on the Merriman's room and.
Hello, I'm Helen Ardup, and I'm here because I strongly oppose the removal of the memorials from our shire. These memorials were erected by our ancestors to Angus Macmillan for his contribution to life in this Gippsland. He opened up a large area to white settlement and was instrumental in the migration of many Scottish folk who've proved to be worthy citizens of Gippsland. History cannot be erased or changed. Future generations need to know what happened in the past. Imagine if Germany had decided to erase and remove the evidence of their Holocaust. It would be horrendous to think that the world would not know about it. It's important that people learn from history. When we went to Germany and visited the concentration camps, they were escorting school children around them. They were teaching them what happened, they were teaching them the history, and they were making sure that the children knew. The same thing happened when we were in Hungary, in Budapest, at the Communist Museum. It is important that people learn from history, and you cannot learn from history if it's wiped out. In China, however, they've taken the opposite view. They've attempted to dismiss, hide Tiananmen Square. It hasn't worked. Everybody knows it happened, but they're not learning from it. The Chinese are not learning from it. We should and must learn from our history. To remove a memorial because a person being honoured has been involved in things that are now considered wrong is not the right way to go about it. We need to teach people. We need to honour what happened in the past. We need to recognise the mistakes that happened in the past, and we need to learn from them. Erasing Angus McMillan from our memory will not assist our current Indigenous people in any way, shape or form other than to remove one memorial. They need healthcare, they need education, they need assistance with domestic violence and so on, and alcohol and drugs, and so it goes. But removing Angus McMillan's memorial is not going to do anything for any one of those things. I believe that we need to leave them there and either erect an identical one beside them and put a plaque on it with the modern perspective on history. And I don't deny that he was certainly involved in things he should not have been doing, but we need to learn from it. So either have a memorial beside it and with a plaque on it, or put a plaque on the memorial that's on the cans that are there. This, interestingly enough, is also the view of Ken Wyatt, who is the Federal Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. It's not possible to erase history. It is important to learn from it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. It was Helen, wasn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. We got your details. That was recorded?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you for making a contribution.
Thank you.
Just wait on our next presenter.
So, Mayor, congratulations to all of the people involved in being able to still allow this community involvement during the COVID social distancing. While it's a little bit clunky, it's great that we can actually keep this interaction going.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. I think it's a good point, and to our people who are engaged in this process, they're doing a really good job. So, well acknowledged. So, good evening. So, who have we got? Just state your name, let us, and you've got approximately 3 minutes. So we're in your hands.
No worries. My name is Rob Hudson. I'm from Bairnstyle. I'm a Gunai Kurno Mindanao man. My heritage is from the Gunai area. My country is this area, the Gippsland. I strongly support the councillors that want to remove the monuments because I was brought up knowing the horrific things that happened throughout what happened around this area. Going to school, though, when you learn about history of Australia, only taught what you had to. And they never taught about any massacres, anything like that at all. What they talked about was how Gippsland was opened up. Now, what I say is they need to be removed because everywhere you go, no matter which monument it is from Benambra right down to Port Albert, I will guarantee 99.9% that there were a mass massacre. Now, you listen to when in the 1920s, when they first decided to put these monuments up, a lot of people didn't want to put them up because they knew what he was like. But in 1926, when they started going up, they were just put up. And they weren't told the history of this man. A lot of the people did know about him. Henry Merrick was the bloke that wrote back to his home country, to his mother, telling him about the atrocities happening in the Gunai Kurno people. And which he saw murdering of Aboriginal people across this nation. Now, me as an Aboriginal person, I teach my kids the true fact of Australia. I teach them the true fact of what happened. And as the lady said earlier, teach them the truth. Absolutely teach them the truth. Do not discard anything like that. But you've got to teach them the truth about what really happened. And by doing that and stepping forward like Wellington Shire, this is be absolutely fantastic to show people that we mean business. No more of this hiding stuff. We've got to make sure we tell the truth. Remove the monuments. If you want to put up a decent monument, tell people what happened there. Because within 10 kilometres of this area or closer, there's atrocities. Teach the history, teach Australia's history, because we only got two sides of that history. And that is me in a nutshell. I'm very personal with this bloke because and his reputation, what he did throughout Gippsland, was absolutely horrendous. And as most school teachers come through the keeping place, I'm the manager of the keeping place in Bairnside, Kutungalung, they are gobsmacked at what happened. 450 people were killed down in Warrigal Creek, more than 100 around the Boney Point area, Sarsfield, Maffra, Benambra, Tambo, Sarsfield, Sale, Kalulu, and so on. It's all written down and also in his words, and also in the words of other people that saw that happening as well. As Australians, we all must accept the past, but also acknowledge the past as well. And removing these monuments will not get rid of history, but also make us more stronger people. So that is me. Please remove them. As a Gunai person, strongly, that would be absolutely fantastic. That is me. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your presentation. It's really appreciated. So thank you for taking the time and telling the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks, guys.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, well, thank you.
If you could state your name for us and the allocation in regard to the presentation is around 3 minutes, so we're then in your hands.
Great. My name is Dr. Shannon Woodcock. I'm from the State Library of Victoria and RMIT University.
So happy for you to go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to begin today by saying that as a white person who was born to dispossessing people of their countries in the unceded countries now called Australia, I pay my respects sincerely to country and to the elders present, future, past and emerging. It's very interesting to hear Rob say that we shouldn't be hiding history. And while he spoke, one of the women in the waiting room was laughing. Earlier, we had a lady named Helen speaking about teaching history, and yet her discourse of the way she spoke about Australians needing to deal with history contained some fallacies that shed light on why people are so attached to the cans of Macmillan. I support the motion to destroy the cans, to remove them entirely, and I do that because I support Gunai people who are calling for this because it causes them pain. Aboriginal people are real people. Sometimes I get the feeling that white people in East Gippsland don't seem to understand that. Helen made the point that in Germany they've put monuments to Jewish people, but she fails to realise that the cans to Macmillan are perpetrator-constructed monuments. So her argument is false. The equivalent argument with Germany would be, imagine if, after they lost the war, Nazi monuments had remained in place and were considered to be valuable parts of history. As I said, these are perpetrator-constructed monuments. Removing them removes one level, and it does not remove the fact that all of us are continuing to perpetrate genocide by dispossessing Aboriginal people right now of their land. Helen enunciated all these problems that they have. Let's remember those problems only exist because our ancestors and us now, exactly now, own the land, control the police, the armed wing of the state, remove the children, and continue to discriminate in everyday life. And anyone who tells me there's not discrimination needs to come and sit in the waiting room for the council meeting and watch people laugh while Rob Hudson, a Gunai man, speaks. That's all I have to say today. Remove the monuments and let's get down to business and discuss really dealing with whether we want to be in perpetuity perpetuators of white supremacy in Gippsland. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us all this evening.
Okay, look, if you could state your name, and there's a time allocation in the order of 3 minutes.
No problem.
So do that and we're in your hands for the next 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Claire Henry. I'm an educator here in Sale and have lived in the Wellington Shire my whole life. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Gunai people as the traditional owners of the land that we gather on tonight. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are the first people of Australia. I acknowledge that Aboriginal sovereignty has not been ceded. Now, I would like to speak as an ally to the Black Lives Matter movement and as an ally to the Gunai and Aboriginal people. I am here today to wholly support the motion to remove these Macmillan cans. The council meeting has only in the last 24 hours been widely reported via local news and social media. As this issue was brought to public attention so quickly, there has been very hot and heavy reactions from the community, mostly those to move on, get over it, and that we can't ignore history. However, there is a side of history that is being ignored, and this is the history of Aboriginal genocide. Yes, it is very uncomfortable to talk about, but this must be recognised if we are to ever heal this country and work towards equality. Gunai people and their allies must be given the space and opportunity by the Wellington Shire to speak this evening, and I thank the Shire for doing that, in order to express their pain and explain the intergenerational trauma still felt by local Aboriginal people when they see a shrine to a man who intentionally displaced and murdered the people and culture who are so indicative to the land that his ancestors now enjoy without any repercussions. Without recognition to the massacres organised and led by Angus McMillan, these cans contribute to the ongoing systemic racism in Australia by celebrating a European figure that has systematically displaced the Gunai-Kurnai people and who was the main instigator for the mass murder of local Aboriginal people that was intended to erase Gunai-Kurnai people from Gippsland. Now, lastly, taking down the cans does not remove the history of Europeans in Gippsland, nor does it ignore the positive contributions Angus McMillan made to the European settlement of Gippsland. But what it does do is work towards not celebrating the history of brutality towards the Gunai-Kurnai people, and it can help heal and work towards reconciliation. By removing these cans, we as a community will make a step towards equality for the Aboriginal people of Gippsland.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Taking the time. Thank you. Hi, if you could state your name and have 3 minutes, and we're in your hands for the next 3 minutes.
Thank you. Lisa Roberts, Bairnsdale. 5 generations of my family have lived in Gippsland, and I've always been interested in history, and it's not easy to find the history of Gippsland. You really have to dig. It's not all in the one place, and it's the history that's written down is only told by one side. I'd like to acknowledge the Gunai-Kurnai people here on whose land we meet, and my wish is that the cans are removed and that we have some proper truth-telling about the genocide that occurred here, and by ignoring that, we're denying genocide. It's quite clear. And I believe that we need to take our lead from the Gunai-Kurnai in how we move on, because their story has not been told correctly by the white community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good evening, Pauline. Pauline, if you'd like to state your name, and then we have 3 minutes.
Okay.
In your hands.
Pauline Hitchens from Wellington Shire Heritage Network. I'd just like to preempt that a letter that the Mayor has received allegedly from the Friends of Angus McMillan, care of 78 McAllister Street, is not correct, in that 78 McAllister Street is Salem District Family History Group. Salem District Family History Group did not send the letter, has no idea who the signatory is. So please take that letter, very insulting as it is, with a grain of salt. Okay. This is not only a case of Black Lives Matter, but that all lives matter, and so do their stories. The story told by the so-called Macmillan cans at present is obviously a biased representation, but destroying them is not a valid resolution. The first issue is the vilification of Macmillan. Just as the cans probably over-glorified his achievement, so today's critics try to lay all the blame for conflict and the decimation of Indigenous people at his feet. In fact, if the research is studied, there is little proof of his deeds. Although it is fair to say that he, like many other early settlers, dealt with many issues in what today is an unacceptable manner. Even Peter Gardner's book, Our Murdering Founding Father, titled as such to increase book sales, frequently notes that there is no evidence for the suggested claims of Macmillan's deeds, but there is that it is probable or possible. To many non-Indigenous residents, the cairns are a depiction of their story and the arrival of their ancestors, regardless of whether that was one or more generations ago. Their removal denies today's truth. We are a modern, multicultural society. The arrival of Europeans can be described as an invasion, a common event for the very people who came to settle here, with Romans, Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings invading England over the centuries. In Australia, the cultural clash was quite extreme, with neither the original inhabitants nor the European settlers recognising the extent to which they misunderstood their opponents. And even the very presence of a new population occupying the land and waterways the original inhabitants had long used to source their food, hunting and removing the native animals and forcing groups into unknown territories impacted on them. And that's as well as the many diseases they brought to the country, which decimated Indigenous populations. It is important that the opinions of the broader population are considered, but it would seem logical that the cairns be amended to recognise that the expedition which mapped the route from Monaro through Gippsland to the port was guided by Indigenous peoples and that there were numerous other participants. In addition, schools, museums and other outlets should be encouraged to provide more information about the original occupants, guided, of course, by their descendants, to help us all understand their lifestyle before European settlement and the many wrongs they have suffered since Europeans joined them. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. Hi, if you could state your name and you have 3 minutes. We're in your hands.
Hello, my name is Jenny O'Neill and thank you very much for listening to me today. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and pay my respects. I just want to say that the cairns, that if we can be kind and if we can remove people's distress, then why wouldn't we remove what is the cause of that distress? And as people who have lived here long before any of us or their ancestors have, why wouldn't we remove the cairns? If it was my ancestors that had been murdered by someone who also did good in opening up a country to a new people, good in our eyes, but if they had murdered my ancestor, then I wouldn't like there to be a representation of something that I had to pass by every day that would cause me distress and upset. So therefore, I would really appreciate you considering the motion. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you very much. Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
If you could state your name and then you have 3 minutes.
Yep, sure.
Present. Thank you.
Yep, so my name is Bess Bocho and I'm here to support the motion to remove the cairns erected to honour Angus Macmillan. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gunai Kurnai people here and on this land as the traditional owners. These cairns dotted throughout the region are rock-made pieces that hold and show who we were. Removing them, though, will show who we are willing and able to become.
In trying to understand the opposition surrounding the removal of these cairns, I wanted to address a few of the arguments other community members have made. The removal of these statues is not a call to erase all mention of these people's names from history books and files. Instead, it is asking for these dated monuments created in their honour and recognition of the land that they traverse to be removed, and where possible, replaced with ones that detail the actual truths of their actions. By removing these cairns, we are not looking to cleanse history. Rather, we see this as a way, an easily achievable way of standing in solidarity and support of the local Indigenous peoples. Removing these cairns will not change the past or even likely the immediate present. But what their removal will do is act as a marker of the kind of future our community and all of us as members of this community can have and are willing to work towards. If, as a council, you still want to make something that signifies the discovery and development of the area, I was just speaking to local Indigenous community members to find a historical figure who actually did the things the cairns are meant to be honouring and celebrating, the discovery of this area. Better yet, and also in response to the challenges faced by small businesses and community members as a result of the COVID pandemic, you could consult with or hire a local artist to create this new monument. Regardless of the path you choose to take going forward in regards to the replacement of the cairns or monuments, the ones erected in honour of Angus McMillan must be removed, and I strongly support the motion for their removal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Hi, if you'd like to state your name, and then you have approximately 3 minutes, so we're now in your hands.
Brilliant, thank you. My name is Kate Watcho. I'd like to acknowledge the Gunai-Kurnai people and their leadership on this really important issue. I fully support the removal of the monuments to Angus McMillan. As we all know, probably by now, McMillan was responsible for orchestrating massacres against the Indigenous people of this region. Like many others, I believe the nature of McMillan's crimes make the existence of monuments to him offensive and inappropriate. As we've seen from some inspirational action across the globe, such as the removal of Confederate statues in America by local councils and by the people, the removal of monuments that glorify white historical figures who committed such horrific acts against Black and Indigenous people is a step forward for communities everywhere. I've heard many people express concern that removing the monuments to McMillan is erasing the region's history. To this, I respond that pointing out these monuments have already erased part of our region's history. These monuments select McMillan because he was supposedly the first person to explore Gippsland, only he wasn't, the Indigenous people were. The monuments commemorate McMillan, which in itself is rewriting history, by asserting that someone who committed mass murder and the displacement of Indigenous people is worth commemorating. I grew up in the McMillan electorate, and I didn't know anything about the massacres in Gippsland until about 2016, I think, when Minister Russell Broadbent was in the news calling on the McMillan electorate to be renamed. By then, I was 22, and I had to relearn the entire history of the region because everything that I remembered was wrong. So these monuments aren't necessary for learning honest accounts of our history. They are preventing us from learning honest accounts of our history. I strongly encourage the council to pass the motion to remove these monuments. Gippsland cannot move forward if it still lies about its past and pays respect to murderers. I would like to finish this with a rhetorical question for the other white people present and who are listening into this discussion. How can we expect true reconciliation with Indigenous people in Australia to happen if we refuse to bring down our monuments to the people who murdered and displaced their ancestors? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do I press the button? Oh, no.
All good? Tam, you can come. Okay.
No, when you're ready.
Yes, my name's Ruth Walker. I live here in the East Gippsland area. I guess my reason of being here, I feel that it's really important to have them removed. In order for us to move forward, we have to address our past. And that's not just ours, but yours. In order for us to have reconciliation, we need to acknowledge the past. It is very painful to have these monuments, plaques up. They don't do, I'm not quite sure why they're there and what their purposes are. But I would ask that they be removed. There's not much more I can say other than please remove them.
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking time to be here.
Thank you.
And that's the final speaker, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking that message was that we had one more, but thanks, CEO. And to continue, we had in fact received a number of submissions through the meeting process, along with others we received from through a number of ways directly to councillors and otherwise. But I wonder, CEO, if you might in fact just speak to that matter briefly for us.
Certainly, Mayor. Since the agenda was published with Councillor Crossley's motion, we've received 239 letters, emails and submissions. About half of those submissions came via our council meeting portal. And the reason I mention that, Mayor, is of course normally we would read those out individually, but given the volume, Mayor, I seek your approval perhaps just to summarise the overall results on the basis that all of those submissions that have come in through the portal will be published individually in the council minutes.
I'm happy with that position, but I just look to councillors to see in fact that there's no dissent in regard to that matter. I'll take silence as so
moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hole. So we, in fact, we're comfortable with that situation, and perhaps, CEO, if we might get some indication of in summary form, what we received.
Happy to provide that, Mayor. We received, as I mentioned earlier, 239 separate submissions. And what we've done, Mayor, is we've basically broken them into 4 categories. So those submissions that support Councillor Crossley's motion and the removal of the cans. Another group who support the retention of the cans, but with a different narrative or plaque reflecting true history. Another group who are against removal of the cans or any change to the cans. And another category, Mayor, we've called other, which is essentially people who are seeking information or clarification on the process. So of those, Mayor, 55% of those 239 supported removal of the cans. 23% supported retention of the cans with the plaques or narrative updated to reflect true history. 17% were against the removal of the cans or any change to the cans, and 5% were in the other category. Mayor?
Thank you, CEO. So by my maths, that's something in the order of about 78% collectively were either A, in favour of supporting the removal of the cans, or B, making sure that the narrative was changed on those cans to reflect a more realistic position. Is that a reasonable summary of what we've seen?
Yes, Mayor, it is.
Thank you. And so on that basis, that would then that ends now the public submission and comments section of this, and I would now in fact look to Councillor Crossley as the mover of this motion. So Councillor Crossley, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. First, before I move the motion, I'd just like to thank all of the community's contributions and the huge response, obviously, of the the written submissions, but also particularly the ones that came this evening, and especially the speakers from the Gunai Kurnai, because they are so often not listened to. So it's a very big thing for them to come this evening.
Councillor Crossley.
Yes, thank you. I move to address the long-standing issue of the inappropriateness of the Macmillan cans, and in the spirit of genuine reconciliation, that Council move forward in partnership with Gunai Kurnai people in a truth-telling process of place, people and history. As the first step to forming a deeper partnership with and understanding of the Gunai Kurnai people, that Council 1 begin the process for removal of the 2 Macmillan cans on land managed directly by Wellington Shire Council, being at the corner of Foster and York Street, Sale, and the corner of Blackburn and Macmillan Street, Stratford. 2. Now I've just slightly adjusted this one, Mayor. So I've added a few words. So seek approval with the Victorian Government or other land managers to commence discussions with the Glawak and the broader community on the appropriate treatment or removal of the Macmillan cans on land not managed by the Wellington Shire Council, but being at the corner of McFarlane and Davis Street, Traralgon Maffra Road, C105 Hayfield, Yarram Memorial Gardens, Commercial Road, South Gippsland Highway, Yarram, Taraville and Yarram Port Albert Road, roundabout Port Albert, Maffra Sale Road, opposite school, Bundalagua, Maffra Bryagalong Road, Bushy Park, Lion Street Gardens, Rosedale, Tomcaps Road, Willong. And 3, engage with community in a partnership with the Gunai Land and Water Aboriginal Corporation on behalf of the Gunai Kurnai community to devise an appropriate way of recognising our shared history. And 4, review and consider the appropriateness of council public reserves currently named for Macmillan, particularly in the context of point 3 above, where the community is appropriately engaged in partnership with the Gunai Kurnai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation.
Call for a seconder for that motion. Councillor.
Yes, I will be seconding that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Is that motion opposed?
Yes.
That was Councillor.
It's not normally recorded, but you've got enough opposition there.
So it's Councillor Rossetti. Thank you. So on the basis that motion is opposed, we'll now move to discuss and debate the motion. So I think. Beg your pardon?
I oppose.
That was Councillor Ripper, was it?
Yes.
So on the basis that motion is opposed, we now move into your hands, Councillor Crossley, to speak to the motion.
Are we making the changes to the motion on the screen?
Yes, Mayor. Just the changes that Councillor Crossley indicated to point 2, the minor changes should be up on the live screen now. In fact, it's just been confirmed to me that they are.
Okay.
Okay, I want to see that first because we're not seeing that at the moment.
Yeah,
that's important.
I mean, that was circulated to councillors earlier, but we'll
yes,
we can have
I did circulate the changes earlier.
Yeah, but it must be on the screen. What we were looking at now.
We have a technical issue to deal with this.
Yeah. Thank you, because that I want it on the screen, if I may, as we would normally have it, Mayor, in our normal council meetings.
So as we normally have it when we meet in person in the chamber, because the technology supports that situation, that's what normally occurs. In regard to our virtual situation, where it appears that we are being technically challenged in regard to facilitating that.
So Mayor, what normally happens is it's on the live screen now. Normally, councillors will have their own version up on the screen and toggle between the Skype. In fact, the Skype will overlay the agenda. If Councillor Ripper is actually in the same building I am, if Councillor Ripper would like a hard copy, Mayor, if we'd like to delay a couple of minutes, I can make sure
we can do that
straight away.
So we accept that delay.
Yeah.
Is everyone else happy with their ability to either see that or satisfied that they've had it circulated to them and they're aware of the nature of the change? I think it's important that we, in fact, continue through this item in full knowledge and agreement of the process.
May I add that I'm happy with that. I'm watching it on the live screen, and it is actually there.
And is it possible to have it copied into the live chat so that Councillor Ripper can see it in the conversation window to the side of our windows? Does someone have a version of it there?
Yep. I'll just start doing that now, Mayor.
Thank you.
As I say, it was emailed earlier. Sorry about this.
It is good practice, though, to have the actual motion at hand. So I understand the restriction, the issue.
And yeah, in our normal world, this works with relative ease, as we all know. Things are not necessarily normal. So that's now come up in the conversation column. That's the point 2 is now in the conversation column. Is everyone able to?
Thank you, Mayor.
We are satisfied in regard to process issues around this. If we're satisfied with process issues, then in fact the next process issue is in fact now to move to you, Councillor Crosley, to speak to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Sorry for the glitch there. I'd just like to say there are very few times in our lives that we can make a significant difference, and this is one of them. This is a moment to show leadership. This motion is about reconciliation. We don't need to debate whether Angus McMillan was a good guy or a seriously flawed individual in the early 1840s who led the Highland Brigade linked to some of the worst massacres in Australia. The jury is already out on that one. There is no dispute. It was the facts that convinced the Australian Electoral Commission to remove his name from the electorate in South Gippsland and rename it Monash in 2018, as was alluded to by one of our presenters. And also in that time, Russell Broadbent stated that if the Gunai people wished that the cairns be removed from the highways, he would not be opposing it. This is not a debate about history. The facts have been established. McMillan was both an explorer and a murderer. And we're not trying to obliterate history. That's not the point of this motion at all. The fact that the facts of the cairns are well established. They are not historically accurate, and they did not spring from a groundswell of popular local pride. In fact, many of them were hard-pressed to get funds to actually construct them. They were a series of 18 propaganda devices conceived by a self-appointed History Memorial Committee in Melbourne. They were installed to give a platform for the Governor, Lord Somers, to lecture the populace on imperial loyalty some 60 years after McMillan's death. They needed to find a white hero, and they made McMillan one. The cairns are a potent symbol, and they were designed to be. They were designed to dominate the landscape. Some 18 of them are scattered across Gippsland. To put the colonial stamp of "we won." This country, Gippsland, is ours. and it is white. To quote from The Monumental Error, How Australia Can Fix Its Racist Colonial Status, an article published in 2017 by Bruce Charles Skates, Professor of History, Australian National University, and I quote, "As the recent debate over Australian statues demonstrates, sanitised symbols of violence and dispossession have long stood unchallenged in the heart of our towns and cities. By occupying civic spaces, they serve to legitimise narratives of conquest and dispossession, arguably colonising minds in the same ways white settlers seized vast tracts of territory," end quote. These symbols of the symbolism of these cans is not lost on the Gunai Kurnai, nor on any other Aboriginal person. This is why it is so important that we start to demolish these oppressive symbols. This is why it is not appropriate to keep them and add another plaque, as some have suggested. As Grattan, a proud Gunai Kurnai man, so eloquently put in his submission, the Gunai Kurnai people were displaced from their country, forcibly removed and often killed. The Macmillan cans represent a celebration of that history to them, the history of genocide. I have had the privilege to listen to the stories from many of the elders in Gippsland. I was the project manager on a State Library of Victoria documentary photography commission of Aboriginal elders with artist Angela Linkushka, commencing in 2000s. I have continued that connection to the community since then, and it was through this connection that I gained a completely new insight to the Gippsland history. This is not a scientific or historic debate. This is about lives. This is about family. This is about pain. This is about intergenerational trauma that we can start to heal now. This is about reconciliation. We need to extend our hand of understanding and willingness to make a significant gesture. The past impacts on the present, and we are responsible for what happens in the future. As Grattan stated, the removal of the two cairns will be a great symbolic step towards reconciliation. The Wellington Shire Council and Glawak have been forging a closer relationship over the last couple of years. I am convinced with that relationship that I feel confident that we can move forward in a truth-telling process and engage the community in a partnership to devise an appropriate way to recognise our shared history. I do not want to preempt what shape that might take. The Glawak board shares this desire. The board chair has stated last week, we are prepared to engage in responsible dialogue to explore ways that the true history of our area can be shared with the wider community. The Gunai Kurnai, as Grattan said, show no will. They don't require retribution. But they believe that it's time to take the steps together forward in a cohesive, deadly Gippsland community, and we look forward to taking that step with them to achieve this. We look forward to a support of this motion so that we can proceed and bring greater healing and a unification of all our communities in our region. This is a time to make a change. This is our point in history to make a difference. Black Lives Matter. Black lives mattered in 1843, and black voices matter now, and we should be listening to them and act. Thank you.
Mayor, could you just repeat that? You're on mute.
Got a bit excited then. Sorry about the process. So, Councillor McCubbin, as second, do you wish to speak to that now, or do you wish to reserve your right?
I wish to reserve my right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. In regard, then I'll call on for the next speaker who will oppose the motion who would like to speak now.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti.
Yeah. Gippsland is an amazing place with majestic mountains, glorious plains, seemingly endless coast, beautiful inland lakes and abundant resources. And it's hard not to love Gippsland and all it has to offer and the people who live here. But like all regions, Gippsland does have a history which has elements of the good, the bad and the ugly. European settlement in the region in the 1800s came at a cost to those who already lived here as well as those who came to settle. This is typical of many times throughout the world history. The extent of this cost was mostly unreported at the time, but it is clear that a significant part of it was borne by the Indigenous community through the skirmishes and massacres that took place. This true story needs to be told, even though it is difficult and painful for many. As a philosopher, George Santayana, said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It is true that we can tell the story in other ways without the cairns staying in place. I would argue, however, that the cairns not only recognise the explorers and the opening up of the Gippsland we all know and love, but they also represent the ignorance of the significant cost borne by the community at the time, especially the local Indigenous community. The erection of these cairns some 80 years after the massacres indicates that the local non-Indigenous community didn't know, or maybe didn't care at that time about the cost of the settlement on the Indigenous and the involvement of some of the settlers in this. This is an important point. Their presence today demonstrates to us how we have moved on as community. We would not have accepted those behaviours now, yet back then these behaviours were hidden or denied, or possibly even allowed or celebrated in some quarters, who knows. The cairns are a physical representation of the community sentiment at that time. This non-Indigenous community ambivalence is reflected in the cairn memorials being erected with significant fanfare. The cairn in Sale, for instance, was unveiled by Lord Somers, the Governor of Victoria, in 1927 as part of a series of memorials organised by the Royal Historical Society of Victoria to honour Gippsland explorers James McFarlane, George McKillop, and Omeo district explorers Angus McMillan and Paul Strzelecki. That's according to research conducted by highly regarded Gippsland historian and author Peter Synon. Synon acknowledges that Gippsland had its own skirmishes and massacres of Aboriginal people and that Angus McMillan was involved. He does, however, say that to denounce McMillan as a murderer or butcher of Gippsland is to misunderstand the times, to fail to acknowledge the dearth of primary evidence, or worse still, to be selective of it, to underplay his formidable achievement as an overlander and trailblazer, and to ignore his later sympathetic interest in Aboriginal welfare. Synon notes that according to the detailed account of writer George Dunderdale, the Highland Brigade of 1943 was not led by McMillan but by his boss and patron Lachlan McAllister, and that McMillan may have ridden with his master Lachlan McAllister at Warrigal Creek on that infamous day. But he writes, "We simply do not know." Synon continues to say that the Dunderdale evidence does not alter the fact that McMillan was involved in a prominent way in those Black Wars, but rather it calls into question his leadership of it and the extent of his participation. It is also an important reminder that the Black Wars were much more than about McMillan. Essentially, they were a series of conflicts, some resulting in retaliatory massacres between invading landtakers or squatters, English, Irish and mostly Scottish on one part, and Aboriginal people on the other, in a struggle, really a war, for survival on the Gippsland frontier. To describe participants such as Angus McMillan as a murderer is to miss the point. For generations past in Gippsland, he was a hero remembered in names and monuments. These were times when little of anything was known about the Black War. Synon finishes off by saying respect for and reconciliation with the first people of Gippsland is the first priority. At the same time, it is also incumbent on today's policymakers to respect the cultural heritage of all people who called Gippsland home. With respect to the McMillan cairns, additional or altered wording might be considered, wording that reflects the ongoing hurt of the Aboriginal people, but also an understanding of a war for survival on the frontier. I agree with Synon that working with the existing cairns is a way of telling the complete story, and that future work could be done to tell more of the story of the impacts of those times. We can and should learn from our history by telling and retelling the true story of our cultural heritage, the good, the bad and the ugly. The cairns should be retained as they are part of our collective story. I thank Councillor Crosley for airing this matter through this motion. As opposed in her opening gambit, I would also like to see reconciliation between the Indigenous and broader communities. But simply tearing down these memorials is not, in my view, the answer to that, as it causes further division, remove a part of the cultural heritage that belongs to all of us, and remove a way of fully telling the story of where we were then and where we are now. Accepting what has happened in a truth-telling process of place, people and history in partnership with the Gunai-Kurnai people and the broader community is the essential element to achieve reconciliation. We are on the road from denying what happened to acknowledging and accepting the past. Knocking down these cairns, in my view, would be a backward step in this journey and the journey that we need to take as a community together. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Rossetti. To speak for the motion.
I would like to do that if I may, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Marr.
Having read many posts on social media, emails, telephone calls, and our gallery tonight, expressing their opinions on this subject, I can rightly say, as we all can, that it is full of differing opinions of what should be done. This is not about changing history, as history has already happened. What it is about is reconciliation with our past, and whilst the steps Angus McMillan took are an important story to Gippsland, so is the story of the Gunai-Kurnai and the actions perpetrated upon them. I do not drive, walk or cycle past a cairn every day being reminded of the actions of the past. I would certainly agree, however, that it is salt in a wound. This matter is about balance and ensuring that the whole story is told from all sides. These cairns were constructed in the 1920s and they glorify someone that has a very controversial history. Removal of the cairns is symbolic to the Gunai-Kurnai and certainly a step towards reconciliation. No matter what the decision is tonight, however, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Crosley for raising this motion, her passion and her work with our Indigenous community members. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. To speak against the motion? And wishing to speak against the motion? No one else? Councillor McCubbin? Yes. Sorry, who was that?
Yeah, Mayor Ian Bye would like to speak against the motion. Okay,
thank you, Councillor Bye.
This is an important thing to me, and at 12:16 on Friday, I learnt that Councillor Crosley was putting this motion forward. When I first got elected to council, I didn't realise I was becoming a historian. We're talking about nearly 100-year-old artefacts or cairns, as we call them, that are part of history. What I'm being asked to decide tonight is something I don't really feel comfortable with without better explanation from what I call experts, whether it's the people from the Gunai-Kurnai or it's actually experts like Peter Simon or the other historians that have done years and years of research into what actually Angus McMillan portrayed and what he actually did. Since Friday, I have done numerous phone calls. I've listened to many people. I have read from different experts. And there is differing opinions that is out there on what Angus McMillan actually did do or mightn't have done. It is part of our history, though, and I don't feel comfortable tonight in passing a motion that, for one, I'm not a historian. I can only read what people tell me and hear. But I'd much rather not move to get rid of 100-year-old artefacts that are in place for a reason until I'm got more information that I can actually make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bye. To speak for the motion? Is anyone else wishes to speak for the motion? On that basis, then I think Councillor McCubbin, would you like to speak, and then we'll leave Councillor Crosley to close the debate. I may speak briefly in between the two of you if that's in order.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk tonight. And thank you to all of our speakers and to the people who came and presented. It's truly a monumental evening for the Wellington Shire. We're here on a unique opportunity to change our relationship with our Indigenous people of Gippsland. It's our chance as councillors, as representatives of the Wellington Shire, to tell the truth about our shared history. It is absolutely a landmark day for the Wellington Shire, and one that I'm immensely proud of. There are some that oppose this motion because they say that we're trying to remove history. God, geez, you know what? If only that was true, you know? If only we could remove history, you know? If only we could go back, if we could go back in time and somehow remove those misunderstandings and abuses that were served on those Indigenous people. Sometimes inadvertently, sometimes intentionally, but there was absolutely misunderstandings between our European settlers and our Indigenous people. If only we could go back and wipe that. If only we could go back and stop them from being removed from their native land. If only we could stop people from removing their culture. If only we could stop the murders. If only we could stop the stolen generations. If only we could stop the fact that they were counted as flora and fauna until 1967. If only we could erase that history. My God, if pulling down those stones means that we can erase that history, I'd pull those stones down tonight. You know, I would, because I want to erase that history. But I can't. I can't. You know, because those pile of stones, they're not history. Those pile of stones aren't history. They're stones. They're stones. They're not Horluxes. The history's in our books. It's in our newspapers. It's in the oral traditions that are passed down from generation to generation. And it sits in our hearts. It sits in the pain that people feel even to this day. That is history. And you can't get rid of that by getting rid of a few silly old cans. We need to tell a dinkum story about what happened. We need to tell the whole story from both sides. We need to show the successes, and there were many of those, and our failures. We need to show our achievements and our mistakes. The purpose of those cans was never, ever, ever to explain the history of European settlement. That was not the idea. They just say, explorer of Gippsland. They were created in 1927 to glorify Macmillan. They are monuments. They are not interpretive signs. So let's look at Angus Macmillan. Let's look at what Councillor Rossetti called the Black War. Let's have a look at it. The University of Newcastle, through their Centre for 21st Century Humanities, a recognised university and a recognised peer-reviewed paper on what happened in Gippsland, placed Macmillan at the Warrigal Creek Massacre, where 150 Aboriginals were slaughtered in reprisal for the murder of Ronald McAllister. And I quote from people who survived that, I quote, "As fast as they put their heads up for breath, they were shot until the water was red with blood." And even if you discount the fact that they were probably led by Lachlan McAllister, they probably were, Macmillan was clearly involved in leading massacres at Boney Point, which is near Marley Point, in 1840, where he shot 15 to 20 Aboriginals in reprisal for killing his sheep. And he admitted as such in a letter to the Lieutenant Governor Latrobe. And then, in Butchers Creek in Meetung, there was 30 Aboriginals were herded beside a river, and they were systematically slaughtered because their crime was, this was their crime in the war, was to spear cattle. And again, at Holland's Landing in late 1842, there was a family of 6 Aboriginals were fired at by a cannon from a boat anchored nearby and killed. Angus was implicated in that as well. Angus was a murderer of Aboriginal people. In fact, this wasn't a frontier war. This was genocide. Now, because of this research and the overwhelming assessment of other legitimate historians and the oral traditions of the Gunai Kurnai people themselves, which we cannot ignore, Macmillan's name has rightly been removed from the electorate to the west, which now honours, and quite rightly so, a war hero Monash. A change supported by all political parties, well researched and supported by all political parties, including, of course, as mentioned by Councillor Crosley, the local member Russell Broadbent. You can go to many of the schools in town. I know I went to Guthridge Primary School in Sale, where Macmillan used to be a house team years ago, and of course they removed that. They've removed that. You go to many schools, they've taken Macmillan's name off honour boards and team names. Macmillan's been removed from TAFE campuses. Search for Macmillan in anywhere but Wellington and he's gone. He's gone. Gone for good reason. Because good people know that Macmillan has a bad past. The rest of Australia has recognised and felt shame about what Macmillan did. They don't glorify his name. This is the history. This is the real history, and this is what people accept. In this debate, there's only one thing that matters, and it's not the history. It's not the history that I'm calling on here. There's only one thing that matters, and that's what the local Indigenous people want. They're the victims. Now, Troy McDonald, the chair of GLAWAC, last week on When News said this. He said he views these Macmillan's cairns as the glamorisation of systematic murder, disposition, and the attempt to annihilate an entire people. How can we be comfortable when any group of people in our shire, particularly our Indigenous traditional owners, how can we be comfortable that they have to drive past these symbols that glorify a murderer of their ancestors? I mean, one of these cairns just sits down the road from Rummiuck. You go into Rummiuck every day, you see the icon to Macmillan. And let's listen to what Grattan Mullet, a proud Gunai-Kurnai man and General Manager for Culture at GLAWAC, has told you. Let's just listen to what he said. The symbolism of these cairns to us is significant. It is an issue that has been clearly on the community and our agenda for quite a while. We are happy to discuss the best way forward with the Shire about these cairns and to assure a more appropriate recognition of Gippsland history, including the non-Aboriginal history. As a starting point, the removal of the two cairns would be a great symbolic step forward, a great symbolic step toward reconciliation. The nonsense about all of this is that the vast majority of all our submissions that we've got all acknowledge that Macmillan was complicit in Aboriginal murder. And then they say something, well, not the majority of them, but then they say something like we should add some explanatory signs, you know, so that as you're going past them at 60 clicks, you can actually read what he did. Well, that's rubbish. Yeah, sure, he hunted down and murdered men, women and children in cold blood, but don't forget, he crossed the Avon River at this point in 1842. You know, he participated in the shooting of innocent black people at Warrigal Creek until the water was red was their blood. But let's remember that he was the explorer of Gippsland. I mean, is that what people want us to do? To have those divisive symbols littered around Wellington, continuing to fight these culture wars? We cannot change history, but our fundamental thinking about it can evolve. We have evolved. I know the councillors sitting around the table are evolved human beings who feel as bad as I do about what happened to Indigenous people. I absolutely know that. What was glossed over as a petty side detail, there were colourful talks of a local legend in the 1840s or the 1930s, we don't ignore today. Aboriginal deaths matter. The vast bulk of people around Australia have realised that Aboriginal deaths matter. And removing the name Macmillan from significant buildings and electoral boundaries is part of recognising that. Surely that tells you that the vast amount of historians agree to his guilt, and we need to send out a similar message that whether you're black or you're white, that we don't glorify your memory by giving you a monument if you kill people. A civilised community cannot hold Macmillan up as being our hero. There were many, many excellent pioneers who did the right thing. They don't get a cairn, but Macmillan does. That's not right. I believe today that we can all live together. I believe that we can be proud of our nation and its diverse people. I believe we can celebrate our rich Aboriginal culture and its thousands of year-old history. Plus, we can also incorporate those people who came across the sea because we've got boundless plains to share. Today, as a mature, caring nation, we can forge a new relationship between Indigenous people and the people who came after them. We are stronger together. But we can't move on. We can't move on while those ridiculous pile of stones sit out there. They clearly offend Indigenous people by glorifying someone that was a murderer of their ancestors. We can't move on until they move on. I wish, with the final words from Roger Fenwick, the CEO of the Gunai-Kurnai Land and Water Aboriginal Corporation, I wish to give his last words. He asks for the complete removal of the cairns. They're very clear about it. The Gunai-Kurnai have no ill will between current community members, the majority of whom also feel human atrocities should be called out and addressed. We believe it is time to take another step forward in a cohesive Gippsland community, and we look forward to taking action to achieve this. We look forward to your support in a process that will bring healing and unification to our region. I agree. It's time for the Cairns to go.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin. In the normal process, because I've called for people to speak throughout this debate, and normally with your reserving your right, Councillor McCubbin, you should have been in the position to close and then move on to Councillor Crosley. I've had a question asked of me by Councillor Ripper, which says, Mayor, am I able to speak? I just want to check the procedural nature of that, in fact, given that we reserved your right to speak, Councillor McCubbin, which ends getting close to ending the debate. I'm of a mind to let everyone express their view as appropriate tonight.
I respect Councillor Ripper's views and wish to give her every opportunity to say.
So regardless of the procedural correctness of this, Councillor Ripper has asked for the opportunity to speak, so I'm happy to acknowledge that. Councillor Ripper.
Thank you, Mayor. Reconciliation, absolutely, yes. Tonight we've heard a lot of opinions, and I would just like to thank each and every one of those people who've sent, phoned, emailed, came in downstairs and talked. Everyone is important, every single person within the Wellington Shire. Now, at the moment, people are hurting badly from bushfires, prolonged drought, now COVID-19. COVID-19, which has brought a plethora of issues for people in the Wellington Shire to deal with. Consultation. Consultation is a great way to move forward. If you are genuine, I believe that under COVID-19, we can't have people in the chamber. Physically, we can't have people in the chamber. They have to come in. Maybe a lot of people didn't want to come in because they weren't comfortable. Other people might have delivered a letter, and there is a lot of people with a lot more age and wisdom on their side who are still not moving out of their house at this stage. So they would want to do an old-fashioned way of bringing a letter in opposition. So I believe the timing is wrong for those reasons. I know you all are respectful. Everyone is respectful, and passionate and emotional. But my speaking against this is it's the wrong time, and as Councillor Bai mentioned, as an historian, I would like, and I respect everyone that said everything, I'm repeating myself, but I want to get the point over, that we need more dialogue before we get to this stage, that it's the wrong time for this. And they are not stones. They are not. That is an opinion. That is an absolute opinion. Yesterday, I had a very emotional day by walking in Stratford to the Garden of Humanity. I sat there and reflected. Passers-by came past. We spoke regarding, and they were talking about the motion. I then walked up and sat on the ledge of Macmillan's Can. Absolutely conflicting. Timing. I believe this is the wrong time, and people have got so much on in their mind that if we want to be respectful, we will respect COVID-19 is an ongoing issue. It's not over yet. And people are not thinking as they thought in March. I believe that if this was at another time, and I'm not sure where this will go, but I'm sure very shortly we will all know. And yes, black lives do matter, all lives matter. But I want to respect those who put on both the can in Rosedale and Stratford how respectful you were with what you put and how you placed it on those cans. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor, allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. Now, before I move to Councillor Crosley, as I assume we opened up before to ask people if they wish to speak, and we've gone down that path. I assume I'm now in a position, before I pass to Councillor Crosley, to just say very few brief words myself. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what it feels like. I don't know what it feels to be Indigenous people walking past the Macmillan can. I don't know what generations of suffering looks like and feels like. I don't get to know that looking through my white privileged eyes. But I listened and I learnt when we visited with Glawak. Much of what was said was important, but much of what was unsaid was equally important. Our Indigenous people are patient and they are respectful and they in fact want better outcomes. Right now, in a world where, as Councillor Ripper so eloquently puts it, we're in the grips of a pandemic with COVID-19. And yet, in the middle of that situation, people went out into the streets right now against medical advice and to be subject to criticism, and the issue to be raised as being we're facing an imported issue. Nothing could be further from the truth. I have images of an Indigenous woman in her cell, removed from a train because she was Indigenous, put into care to be looked after, but she wasn't. If she'd been you, Councillor Ripper, or you, Councillor Marr, or perhaps me, intoxicated on a train, we probably would have had the opportunity to sleep it off on the train while we went home. But we were taken into protective custody. And how much protection did she get? Another Indigenous family without a mother. And yet we seem to sit here and say, let's consult more. Well, how much more consultation do we need? Even in the very short time that this matter has been on the agenda, that response is overwhelming in my view. If you add the two columns together, which says remove them or modify them to reflect the absolute history, that's an overwhelming 78% of respondents who've said one way or another, enough is enough. So we've got an opportunity tonight to, in fact, show leadership, just like John Howard decided to do after the Port Arthur massacres, when he in fact said, we need to do something about this situation. We need to in fact act. We got an opportunity to act or not act. I know my role will be to in fact, whatever occurs tonight, I get the role to speak to that decision. I can tell you quite now there's only one decision that I'm really comfortable speaking to. Councillor Crosley, I'm in your hands.
Mayor, I apologise. I've just noticed, and maybe a technical issue, Councillor Hole has just messaged saying he's indicating he would like to be heard. So hopefully, Councillor Hole, that's your determination, Mayor, but can you hear me, Councillor Hole?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So in your hands, Mayor.
Yeah, well, as I said, obviously we went through the process, and with Councillor McCubbin's right to reserve his right, and then we were looking to move the discussion, but we in fact were able to. We opened it up on with Councillor McCubbin's consent for Councillor Ripper to speak. I would imagine Councillor McCubbin, you would extend that privilege.
Absolutely, I would.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm speaking against the motion, and the amount of interest shown throughout our community in relation to this agenda item is probably one of the heaviest I've seen in 20 years of being on council. Yeah, and we've had some interest in lots of things around the Shire. There's been a lot of passion in this debate externally, and some of the facts that we're hearing are slightly miscued in relation to what some of the historians have in their printed paraphernalia. Like Councillor Boy, I'm not a historian. In fact, nobody around the table, as far as I'm aware, is an historian. But most of us have done our homework. The interesting thing that we can't go back and recover yesterday, but we do have the opportunity to learn from it. The Macmillan's history in developing the Gippsland area is a great area in which we all now live. But history has a bad habit of being altered over time as memories fade and passed down stories become embellished. The quote I'd like to pass on here is from a Dr. Wayne Caldo, who spent over a decade researching Gippsland's early history, which was a research fellowship at the State Library, and it was researching the 1840s Gippsland. And in his heavy work, in the case of the Warrigal Creek Massacre, it is based on a story in a children's magazine in 1925. 82 years after the supposed event, and it doesn't mention Macmillan. Dr. Caldo states quite emphatically, the cold hard reality is that there is not a shred of evidence that Macmillan was involved with any massacres. Probably the massacre we're talking about is the one that McAllister, after Ronald McAllister was killed, because the violence was not a one-way street, and that came from Brendan White, a PhD, who's also studying our history and going that far back. What I find hard to reconcile is if Macmillan was so tough and hard and against the Indigenous people of the time, is why did he go to Melbourne and get a fellow by the name of William Logan, who was on a murder charge, and Jimmy Raymond, who was also locked up in jail in Melbourne, and worked hard to get them out and brought them back to Gippsland? There is a photograph of him with them and shaking a hand sitting in the middle of them. And I found it hard to reconcile that a bloke who's supposed to have gone out and killed all the black fellas is suddenly sitting there shaking their hands. When he was elected to Parliament and afterwards, Macmillan worked on behalf of the Gippsland Aboriginal during his last 10 years of his life. Macmillan distributed food and blankets to the Kurnai. He was a local guardian of them. He was on the committee to select a site for a mission station in the Sale Mafra area. In Parliament, he was on the select committee for the protection of Aboriginals prior to 1860. Jimmy Raymond, who was one of the people he got out of prison, was his continuous companion during the 1860s. And was with Macmillan, who was fatally injured in the bush in 1865. To me, there's two sides. We've got one side where the historians dispute the facts that Macmillan was involved with the bloodshed. And yet we've got the other story where for the last 10 or 12 years of his life, he worked very hard to protect the Aboriginal people. So I'd like to say, speaking against this, I'd like to finish up with a paraphrase or whatever from Warren Mundine just before the last election, when he wrote an editorial in the paper, and most of you probably would have read. And his comment was, "It's our time to leave the past and move on with the future." And I think that by leaving our cans there, we'll be able to do that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you heard me.
Yes. We can't hear you, Alan, is it?
You're muted, Alan.
Yeah, I got myself ahead of myself with the muting. So, Councillor Crossley, we're in your hands now to close the debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Where do I start? I'll start from the beginning. This motion is about reconciliation. I'm not here to debate the rights and wrongs of Macmillan. You can have that debate with the Federal Election Commission, because they seem to be convinced by the science. They seem to be convinced by the University of Newcastle, the University of Melbourne, and I think it's also Swinburne. I think you can have your argument with them. This is a debate about reconciliation. And talking about timing, Carmel, now is the time. There is a global movement. Haven't you noticed? It's not just the COVID-19. There is a global movement to address our past, to address our relationships currently with First Nations peoples. This is going across the world. And so now is the time to grasp this. And I think that is why I put this motion up now, because the community was already discussing this. This was out in Facebook, in Twitter, on various platforms, on the radio. This was coming from the community. And the community have responded. As Malcolm has said, they've never had so much of a huge response to a motion as this one. So, Carmel, you don't have to be worried about people hiding in COVID and not having their say on this matter. And I think if I had my figures right, there's actually 59 of those submissions, those written submissions, that supported this motion. Another 25, I think it is, that supported having something said about Macmillan in these things. Nobody's talking about obliterating history. Nobody's talking about, we have to keep embellishing this story. Sorry, I think there was 17. The thing is now is definitely the time. And we don't have to rely on bits of paper for history. History was not always written down. History with the Gunai Kurnai is an oral history, and that flourishes and flourishes today. These are narratives that have come down from generation to generation, and that was expressed to you in the presentations that the Gunai Kurnai people came down, and Grattan Mullet from Glawak as a very strong representative, and coming from a great family of that whole great traditional law and information of the Mullets. I think it's crucial that we think, if we think, and hark back to what Jenny said, what harm do we do if we take these away? But just think what harm we will do if we leave them there. A continual wound, a continual reminder of the oppression that will then go and continue to actually stop the growth of not only their community, but all of our communities. You know, it's just important that we should grasp this moment. And I think it's a bit disingenuous of Councillor Bai to say he received, you know, the notice on Friday and, you know, he's not a historian and how can he make a decision? There's been reports that have had all of these links to the history of Macmillan, to the various reports. Was commenced in 2017 when we were looking then at an application to move the cairn from the Rosedale corner, and that was very clearly stated that Gunai Kurnai and Glawak were their proposal then was that we should be looking at dismantling these cairns and not replacing them. So we've had I think it's about 3 reports on Macmillan and the cairns in council. These reports also include the screening of the documentary Warrigal Creek massacre in what I've got it here, April 2018, and we had another report in January 2018 also on the cairns and the issues. So councillors have had full opportunity to do considerable background with all of these information. And also there was opportunities to go to the keeping place in Bairnsdale for cultural training. And so if councillors haven't availed themselves of this information, they can't now say, I don't know, we need more time. You've had plenty of time. We've had known information since 2017. I just feel that there is a groundswell. We need to take this chance now. We need to make a new history. We need to make history now by reconciling, holding our hand out in a very positive way and taking down these 2, as we say, Darren says, piles of rocks. They are not history, they're in the wrong place, and they have the wrong meaning for us to have a future together. So I implore you to make history. The world is watching us. The world is watching us here. And we need to be a positive step to a positive, unified future. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Crosley. It's on that basis that we'll put the motion. Those in favour, we'll need to do it by name and the current circumstances. Those in favour, we could respond one by one.
Carolyn Crossley in favour.
Yeah, muted, I think, Darren, but that's okay. I got that.
Councillor McCubbin in favour.
Councillor Marr in favour.
Councillor Hall in favour.
Councillor Hall against.
Those opposed, Councillor Hall.
Councillor Rossetti.
Councillor Rossetti.
Councillor Bai.
Councillor Ripper against.
And Councillor Stevens against.
On that basis, the motion is lost. Division. We should be able to relist that. So it was Councillor Crosley, Councillor McCubbin, Councillor Marr, Councillor Hall in favour, against Councillor Ripper, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Bai, Councillor Hall, Councillor Rossetti. Thank you. Moving on.
Mayor, could I call a point of order, please?
Yes, Councillor Ripper.
Mayor, I would stand up, but it's not appropriate. Could we have a 10-minute comfort break, please?
All those in favour, against, I think the ayes have it. Thank you. Make it 5.
Gail, can you hear me?
I certainly can, Malcolm.
That's all right. Thank you for that, because
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I've lost me doodle only because I haven't got the screen from over there.
Oh, okay, I can hear you. So
okay, thank you.
Thumbs up.
Just checking, are we all back?
Thank you, yep.
Councillor Boy's back.
Yes, I'm here.
Malcolm,
Councillor Crossley's here.
Councillor Rippers in situ.
Thank you.
So I've returned Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. Okay, I think we should be right to go. Moving on, item A82, response to petition vegetation management in Wellington Shire. Councillor McCubbin.
Yes, indeed. You'd reckon I'd have my act together while we had a break. My apologies. Okay, here we go. I'd like to move the following motion, that in response to the petition presented at the ordinary council meeting of 19th of May 2020 from Wellington Residents and Ratepayers Group regarding concerns for community safety and roadside vegetation management, Council 1, write a letter to Wellington Residents and Ratepayers Group outlining the new approach already under development for fire protection work on council roads, and 2, in line with several previous requests, seek clarification from Mr Mills on the role, membership and function of the Wellington Residents and Ratepayers Group Incorporated.
I second that, Mayor. Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Wellington Ratepayers and Residents and Ratepayers groups and those people who contributed to the petition for allowing us to talk a little bit more about our roadside management. We absolutely appreciate the communities within the Wellington Shire want us to strike a balance between fire preparedness and, of course, the maintain of forest habitats. I can say that the council has put some new procedures in place. We heard about them today, and I won't spend too long talking about them. It's been a long night already. But I can tell you that we've bought this ripper new machine called a spider, which crawls up the side of cliffs, taking select trees out and ensuring that we have safe roadside management and maintain our habitat in the appropriate areas. So we have made some significant changes, and I would like to congratulate the staff for putting that into place. Absolutely wonderful stuff. In order for the second position, I think it's really important that council clarifies its relationship with groups that represent the community, and so we've just asked for some clarification issues. If they could pass that on, we would appreciate it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin. Any invited addresses, presentations or acknowledgements? CEO, no. We will move on. Any questions on notice?
Sorry, none, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item A11.1, Mayor and Councillor Activity Report. Councillor Rossetti.
Yes, Mayor. I move that the Mayor and Councillor Activity Report be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. Second, Councillor Marr. Councillor Marr. Unmute Councillor Marr.
Sorry, some technical difficulties, but right. Yes, I'm more than happy to support that.
Thank you, Councillor Marr. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you for councillors for passing that, because I don't think I've got much more argument left in me. Just to say, Mayor, that the report does note a hell of a lot of work still going on, even though a lot is having to be done by Zoom and other technologies. So well done to you and the other councillors for keeping the business of the Shire running.
Thanks, Councillor Rossetti. We might move on to item A12, Youth Council report. I understand that due to late commitments, the Youth Mayor with work commitments is unable to attend, and we have the Deputy Youth Mayor, Shannon Darmack, available to us. So if we could wait for Shannon to come on the line to speak to that report, that would be useful. So just bear with us for a moment or two. Just waiting on Shannon Darmack to come online. We'll give Shannon a moment or two longer.
Not sure where he is, ma'am. Sorry.
I'm happy. We could defer it until he comes available. Mayor, you can do whatever you want.
Mayor, I apologise. Sorry, he's about to join. It's just taking him a little bit longer. I just had a message that he's about to join us.
Thank you, CEO.
The vagaries of the e-age, Mayor.
Perhaps the Mayor could have bought his guitar for these little interludes.
Councillor Rossetti, I have a new one. Very impressive. So I've shared the imagery with the CEO, who looks at me in horror to know that the Mayor has a new guitar, but we'll just keep that to one side for the moment.
Aussie bush poetry, that's what we need, Scott.
Otherwise, any progress there, CEO?
No, I apologise, Mayor. Apparently they're having some difficulty phoning him in. They're trying now. Shall we move on to the next?
We will indeed. So let's hold that matter over for the moment and move on to item C1.1, the Chief Executive Officer's Report. Councillor Marr.
I'm happy to move that the Chief Executive Officer's Report be received.
Seconded, Councillor Stevens.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You too were on delay, Councillor Stevens. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr?
I don't have anything to add other than the fact that looking at what the CEO's been undertaking recently over the last month has been a bit of work, and well done to him.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. Moving on to item C1.2, May 2020 Council Performance Report. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that the Council receive and note the May 2020 Council Performance Report as attached.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Second, Councillor Bye. Councillor Bye.
Sorry, running two mouses. I clicked on the wrong one. I'll second that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to our performance report, I think it's good to note that we have got a positive budget result for this current financial year, and that continues the excellent financial outcome for council and its financial management. We are proceeding quite satisfactorily with our capital works program and other assets and debtors. They're all in line with expectations. I note that the stage one of the Cameron Sporting Complex, which is possibly one of our biggest community budget items for the year, is reaching the completion of stage one, and everything is going along according to plan there, and that should be completed in July 2020. It's also very pleasing to see that the Tarra Trail Stage 2 is well underway. So I note that we've got 94 projects at practical completion, 31 proceeding, and there's 5 more that are about to start. It's also very pleasing to note that we've got the grant of $536,000 from the government to do combating of weeds, and that's going to be of great benefit to our farming community. Yes, and I also note that the staff have been doing a great job during the coronavirus shutdown, and that there are more facilities that are going to be able to reopen after the 22nd of June. So that, and just the last thing I'd like to note is I'd like to thank the library staff for the work they've done trying to provide service to the public during the shutdown, and that the click and collect library service, there were 1,185 patrons who used the service, and there were 3,998 items that were delivered. So that was great work by our library staff, and thanks to them for the work they've done. So that's basically what I'd like to say. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stevens. I understand that we have Shannon Darmack available to us, so we'll go back to item A12.1, the Youth Council report. If Shannon's available on the line, if you'd like to perhaps speak to this, Shannon, in the first instance before the motion is moved. You there, Shannon?
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
How
are you all?
Yeah, good. Thank you for being here, and if perhaps you'd like to speak briefly to the report, that would be that'd be appreciated. We're in your hands for a short period.
And that's the report about the Youth Council.
That's the one? Yes.
Okay. I am actually doing it on behalf of the Youth Mayor and the Deputy, because they are both unavailable for tonight.
Right. So, in your hands.
Cheers. Alright. I'm just going to read what they've sent me, so if it doesn't make sense, I do apologise.
Happens to me all the time, Shannon. Good luck.
Okay, so where to start? Like everyone, the past 3 months has provided a whole lot of new challenges for us. Some of us have lost our jobs. Some of us have changed our living arrangements. Some of us enjoy learning from home, and some of us don't. We have all missed or are missing regular contact with our friends, family, and each other. In spite of lower levels of engagement and enthusiasm with the Youth Council business, we have met weekly during the past months and have kept in touch. Sometimes we spent, some time was spent talking about how we could engage meaningfully with the youth community in a way that was different to the enormous amount of online options out there. talked radio for a while before getting very excited about developing a podcast that we could pass on to the next generation of youth councillors. We called the project The Vocal Why, and 8 youth councillors are a part of the project team, most of whom will be entering their second year in July. The focus of the podcast material will be about giving youth a platform to share their stories of life as a young person in Wellington. We're excited and hope to have the first podcast released in July. Many other projects have been put on hold due to the COVID-19 restrictions. The opening of the Youth Art Prize was cancelled. However, the exhibition was hung before shutdown and looks fantastic. We hope to have it judged by mid-June and that the artists get an opportunity to see their works hung in the gallery. The Wellington Youth Awards has also been postponed. We want to hold this event this year because we think it's important to celebrate the great things youth do in our communities and are looking at when it can be. The talks and visits to schools that had begun last term to talk with student leaders about the youth summit and a survey. We wanted their support in getting their schools to complete. Didn't get finished either. Recommendations for all schools, for all school visits to have had hard copies of the survey. However, this was not feasible. 2 weeks ago, we launched our 7-minute online survey to gather the top issues young people care about pre and post COVID-19. We are looking forward to getting these results and working with the new 2021 Youth Council team to develop the Youth Summit. It will also look quite different to what we initially planned. We are excited about this though. The Headspace satellite in Sale is set to start delivering remote service sometime in July. Youth Council is meeting regularly with the community engagement and project manager from Headspace, acting as a youth advisory group. We have all enjoyed the process and felt very valued. We have learnt a lot and cannot wait for the centre to open, and feel sure that there will be evident need to shown for a standalone service in Wellington. That advisory work is for the 2021 team. The Youth Council recruitment has been more difficult this year as well, but we are excited with the young people who have applied. The outgoing youth councillors this year, Deputy Mayor Caitlin Wilfred, the Secretary Rebecca Hector, Councillor Ivan, Ali, Chloe and Charlie will be staying on to help with the induction of the new team and help with the Youth Summit. We are also planning to set up a Wellingtonshire Youth Council alumni. So although this is my last report as Youth Mayor, this isn't the last time you'll see us. Youth Council has been a really great experience. I've learned things about myself and the community that I didn't think I would have gotten elsewhere. We would also like to say a big thanks to Councillor Ripper, Councillor Crosley, Councillor McCubbin and Mayor Hall for jumping on our meetings and answering our questions. Thank you all for your ongoing support. I cannot hear you, sorry.
Thank you for telling me that I've messed up the technology again. But thank you for coming along. I'll repeat that and presenting the report on behalf of the Youth Mayor. Obviously, short notice. We're grateful for that and grateful for the participation and the enthusiasm that the Youth Council demonstrates. And now I'll, in fact, with that thanks, move to Councillor Ripper to move the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council receive the Youth Mayor's quarterly report.
Second, Councillor By. Okay, got that. I got that got that by a bit of lip reading. So we're all guilty tonight. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion's carried. Councillor Ripper, do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Shannon, for reading that. I've been involved probably for 6 or 8 months as the councillor going to these meetings. I find it a privilege. I've so enjoyed it to learn about the youth, what the youth are doing, and the training that they're getting. They are our future. And from what I see, we have got a group of very good youth councillors who are very valued. And they have taught me a lot, and I hope I've been able to pass some wisdom on to them. So I wish all those, the outgoing youth councillors, the Deputy Mayor Caitlin Woodford, Secretary Rebecca Hector, Steve Irwin, Ellie McGregor, Chloe Bethune and Charlie Vernon, who are staying on to help the team. But I'd like to thank Ivan. And over this period with the COVID, it was interesting listening to how they were coping, then how they were coping with going back to school. And they are a great team, and with Headspace happening, they are there for the youth. So any youth that may be listening to this that wants to join, or any youth that needs to talk to youth, please go online and get in touch with one of the Wellington Youth Councillors. They are valued in Wellington Shire. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ripper, and thanks again, Shannon, for coming along. We appreciate your presence tonight. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Good man. Thank you. So we move on by my reading of the agenda where we're up to right now. We're moving on to item C 2.1, Assembly of Councillors. Councillor By.
Thanks, Mayor. I move that Council note to receive the attached Assembly of Councillor records for the period 28th of May 2020 to the 10th of June 2020.
Seconded that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion's Carried. Councillor By.
Happy with that.
Moving on to item C 2.2, Audit and Risk Committee minutes. Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council receive and note the minutes in brief, attachment Audit and Risk Committee 28th of May 2020 minutes in brief, and the confidential attachment Audit and Risk Committee minutes of 28th of May 2020, and clause 2 as set out in the agenda.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. That's seconded.
Yes, seconded by me enthusiastically.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin, the de facto member of the Audit and Risk Committee. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion's carried. Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that we had a very successful, I thought, and pretty full Audit and Risk Committee at the last meeting. It was quite actually interesting. We had online conversations with both the external auditor and the internal auditor, and it was nice to actually be able to view them in and look at them rather than talk to them through a black little box on the desk. So that was quite a positive outcome of Skyping the meeting. I'd just like to highlight to councillors that there were three internal audit reports that were tabled at that meeting. That's pretty, normally there might only be one or sometimes two, but there were three. So that was the review of the operations of the wedge from an OC health and safety point of view, the landfill and waste management review, and the human resource management review. And I'd commend councillors to go and look at those three reports, which are in the attachment. Basically, there were a few minor issues in each of those areas, but nothing substantial. And I think it was all very positive to see that, yes, from the external audit point of view, I think there's just everything is normal, proceeding with or normal as it can be in these times, to proceed with this year's external audit. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. We move on to item C 2.3, adoption of the 2021 Budget and Fees and Charges Strategic Resource Plan and Rates and Service Charges.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that one, Council adopt the 2020-21 budget, including fees and charges, 2020-2021 and 2021-22 budget allocation for the following multi-year projects: the Toongabbie, Cowra and Weir Roads, Cowra reconstruction, $1.2 million, Sale Toongabbie Road reconstruction and widening, $1.5 million, Gordon Street reconstruction, Hayfield, George Street to Harbeck Street, $500,000, National Park Lock Sport Safety Treatment, $300,000. That's helped the Mayor get home. Oh, no, she can't say that. Lake Guthrie Sky Sale Environmental Education Centre, $600,000. Mackerel Lawn Tennis Club Pavilion Redevelopment, $918,000. Given the time of the night, I'm happy to take the rest as read.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. Do I have a...
I'm happy to second that, Councillor Crossley, Mayor.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you also to all those people who made submissions to the budget after we put our proposed budget out. I think there were 14 submissions, and really appreciate people taking an interest. We know that this budget has been drafted against a backdrop of so many challenges we've recently experienced. The ongoing drought, then the fire, and then COVID. We really haven't had much of a chance to draw a breath. These challenges continue to impact our community, and therefore this budget actually represents a 0% rise. That, I think, is the first 0% rise we have ever had at Wellington Shire Council. Happy to be corrected, but I've asked about and I can't find any evidence of it ever being 0%. That freezes our rates. We could have gone up to the rate cap, but we chose to go to zero. That doesn't mean that everyone's property, of course, will be rated at a zero change, as, of course, the rate in the dollar is applied to people's values. If people's values have gone up more than others of their property, well, their rates will go up a little bit. If their property price has gone down, then the rates will go down a little bit. But they'll certainly not go up as much as if we had put that up to the 2% cap. So I think thank you to all the councillors for supporting that 0% rate cap to try and do our bit, as the other levels of government are doing, to support our communities through these tough times. But that freezing of our rates will create its own challenges, because we're going to maintain our waste charges at existing levels, and we need to now support our council officers to work hard to find savings during the financial year. The fact that we haven't taken up the 2% CPI rate cap means we are budgeting for an operating deficit of $1.1 million. I know that the council officers are already working on finding savings to offset this, and certainly councillors have had some suggestions on the way through as well. Further, in recent weeks, councillors received an advance grant payment applicable to the next financial year. The Victorian Grants Commission cash payment of $7.2 million was paid to council to act as an economic stimulus now in these difficult times. So the final budget document has been amended to reflect reduced income in 2021, and the operating deficit now becomes $8.3 million. We also have capital grants set aside for the 2021 financial year to complete a number of infrastructure projects, many of which I just mentioned at the start in the motion. And if we add these capital grants to the operating budget, the deficit, then the overall comprehensive result will reflect a surplus of $9 million. And these grants will assist council to undertake a capital works program of approximately $52 million. The council and the councillors were really keen not to see significant impact on our spend, because, of course, the capital works program keeps many people in our communities employed, and if we were to really pull in that budget, it would have a doubling impact on people already struggling with the effects of COVID and the drought and the fires. Also, as we emerge and start to recover from COVID-19, we'll have more of an idea of how our community is faring and how our businesses have been impacted, because we've already actually begun a wide-reaching business restart campaign, which is going to be launched when restrictions are lifted. We'll include in our financial processes a formal 6-month budget review early in 2021, so that we may better understand the impacts of these recent challenges. So congratulations to the councillors and staff for putting together this budget, and I think it'll look after our communities well over the coming 12 months.
Thanks, Councillor Rossetti. And in the usual way, in the adoption of a budget, it's commonplace to, in fact, extend to all councillors, if they have a desire to speak to this item, then they're free to do so. Does anyone else want to make comment in regard to the budget?
Mayor, I'm happy to say something. Councillor Mark. I just want to reflect on the fact that COVID impacts have certainly made us all appreciate the special place where we live here in the Wellington Shire, and that within the budget there is $1.8 million allocated towards open space, parks, playgrounds, reserves and sport grounds. And there is a commitment from council to attract funding for the warmer pool project in Yarram, enhancing the amenity of this facility for our community. And there is also a further commitment to secure funding for the Great Southern Rail Trail, which will connect Alberton to the trail in South Gippsland. Stimulating our local economy and raising its profile makes Wellington a great place to live. It's also an attractive place for business to come to, and will certainly enhance our economic growth and encourage people to move to the area, as it's a great place to bring up a family. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Anyone else like to speak to the budget?
Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Ripper.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to speak with the formulation of the budget, and with the 1.1 million that staff do not have in their business now, that they have to look for savings. Now, a lot of the staff have been working, most of the staff have been working from home. And those working from home have been schooling children, both mothers and fathers. It has been a difficult time for them all. So I would like to thank each and every one of those, the managers, the CEO, and all the councillors who all work for a team. They're all public servants. They are serving the public. So thank you very much under these circumstances for what you've been able to do and continue to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. Anyone else wish to speak in regard to the budget process? If not, we will close this. And can I just acknowledge again too the tremendous amount of work undertaken by the council officers, and again the interest in of the community who put their positions to us. These are indeed difficult times. I think we've done a really good job under the circumstances, and well done to all concerned in putting this together. So we might move on to item C 2.4, amendment of council meeting schedule and revocation of CEO temporary delegation increase. And I understand we're in your hands, Councillor Hull.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to move that Council revoke the decision made on the 7th of April 2020 Council meeting to hold one Council meeting per month from July to December 2020 and transition back to 2 Council meetings per month during this period. 2, make public the schedule of 2 council meetings per month for the remainder of the 2020 calendar year. And 3, revoke as of today the temporary increase in the CEO's financial delegation up to $1 million made at the 19th of May 2020 council meeting, given the transition back to 2 council meetings per month.
Second, Councillor Marr.
Yes, I'm happy to support that.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Hull, do you wish to speak to that?
Just quickly, Mayor, thank you. When the new world hit us, we're going to go on virtual, and nobody knew how life was going to grow and develop, and because of the proximity of not being allowed to be too close to each other, and we introduced this Skype and Zoom meetings. Well, I've got to say that the councillors and the officers have taken to it like ducks into water, and so now we're handling the job pretty well, usually, and so we've decided to go back to two meetings a month so we can deal with the business at hand as quickly as we used to.
Thanks, Councillor Hull. We move on to item C 3.1, Strategic Land Use Planning Preferred Project 2020-21 and other priorities. Councillor Marr.
Yes, I move that Council approve 1, the residential land stocktake and Port of Sale Master Plan Review projects as outlined in the report as the priority projects for the 2021 Strategic Land Use Planning Work Program, and 2, the secondary strategic land use planning priorities as outlined in this report.
Second, Councillor Bye.
Yes, I second that, Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, I shall. Thank you, Mayor. Whilst our planning department has an already loaded work program, there's still some scope for them to undertake a further strategic project for the land use planning team. However, a decision on what to do is guided by some criteria, particularly resources, budget, urgency of the matter. The opportunity of a listening tour conducted by our new General Manager of Development, Brent McAllister, has provided the opportunity to understand current issues that highlighted a residential lot shortage and the need to review, consult and formally adopt the Port of Sale Master Plan. The outcomes will result in establishing the extent and identification of land supply within key townships, highlighting opportunities and constraints, and facilitation of development of residentially zoned land within MAFRA, provide choice for those who are relocating to our area from Sale, and identification of future land release areas and incentives to activate development. And furthermore, to create an updated master plan for the Port of Sale that embraces and reflects recent developments within that precinct and its surrounds. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. We might move on to item C 3.2, transfer of council property to Miradong Services Incorporated. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolve the property described as 14 Lawler Street, Yarram, as shown on the plan within and more specifically referred as Lot 3 On plan of subdivision 201547W, volume 09722, folio 955, is not required for council purposes. And 2, council advertise its intention to transfer the property below market value to Miradong Services Incorporated, subject to the provisions of a Local Government Act 1989, section 189 and 223, including calling for submissions in relation to the proposed sale for an amount of $11, including GST, and points 3, 4 and 5 as set out in the council agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Would you like to second, Councillor Marr?
Yes, thank you.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd just like to thank Miradong, and I'd like to particularly thank our councillor officers, Paul Johnson and Daniel Gould, for their work on this matter, because it's taken quite a while to get approval from the Department of Health and Human Services to enable this transfer. And just to give a quick little bit of a thumbnail history, approximately 32 years ago, the former council received a grant from the old Ministry of Housing to actually build 2 units and to let them be rented out for low cost to people who had low incomes. Now, after a couple of years, the former council was approached by Miradong, and Miradong took over one of the units, and then when the second unit on site became vacant, they took over both units. And since that time, so that's probably almost, I'd say, close to 30 years, Mr. Mayor, these units have been occupied by Miradong, and in more recent times, they have basically occupied them on a peppercorn rent and have been responsible for maintenance. And now Miradong need to actually do some major refurbishment, and they agreed to, they wanted to purchase these units, and so the council agreed to that, but the Department of Health and Human Services, they hold a caveat over the title which says that if the properties are sold, the money needs to be repaid, the proceeds need to be repaid back to the department. So that's really the main reasons why so there's 2 reasons why we're agreeing to sell this property at a very small amount. It seems ridiculous to do it, but number 1, Miradong are going to take responsibility for doing major refurbishments, and 2, if we sold them on the open market, we'd be effectively paying all that money back to the DHHS, and we would be losing that housing stock for low income people in our community. So it's a great outcome for council and for Miradong and for the Miradong clients who occupy the units, and I think that probably sums it up pretty much as I can.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. Sounds like a very good outcome, and thanks to all concerned in the process. We move on to item C3.3, Community Sports Infrastructure Stimulus Program, Great Southern Rail Trail. Councillor Marr.
Yes, I move that Council submits a funding application in partnership with South Gippsland Shire Council to secure Sport and Recreation Victoria's Community Sports Infrastructure Stimulus Program funding to complete the Great Southern Rail Trail between Alberton and Welshpool.
I understand you'd like to second that, Councillor Stevens?
Yes, I'm very pleased to be able to second that motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Mayor. The total cost of this project is in the vicinity of $3.8 million. This motion is to support Council's application for funding 90% of the project cost from the recently announced community sports infrastructure grants that align strongly with this project. Completing this trail creates a 106-kilometre link between Leongatha and Yarram and will be the longest continual rail trail in Australia. So it certainly it will certainly be impressive if we are able to secure this funding, and it will bring a benefit to our community and the economy, which is something that we certainly need right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. Moving on to item C 4.1, Local Government Power Purchase Agreement. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to move to the recommendation that Council agree to participate in the local government power purchase agreement tender, considering governance structures and pricing amendments made by the buyers group in accordance with outcomes of an independent probity review. 2, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to appoint Darebin City Council to act as a tendering agent by executing the participation deed and, in the event of a successful tender, to enter into a long-term contract with a preferred energy retailer. And 3, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to write to the MAV to terminate the existing agency arrangement.
Understand. Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Second, the Councillor By.
Yes, Mayor, I'll second that.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor McCubbin.
Yes, indeed. It's been a long process, but look, one that's worth pursuing. The outcome for council, of course, is a likely reduced cost of power for our selective sites. We are very keen, if you like, to get 25% of our energy from green sources, and this is going to mean a reduction in approximately 1,300 tonnes of CO2 each year, which will help our environment. Also, because of a long-term contract, a 10-year contract to be able to supply that green power, there will be increased budget certainty established under a long-term contract with a suitable retailer. It has, as I said, had some difficulty with the way the buying group has been allocated, but it is a very strong buying group, and we're looking forward to a result coming back to the CEO shortly.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin. We might move on and again for you, Councillor McCubbin. C4.2, supply of electricity to large buildings and facilities and unmetered public lighting under RFT EC 8310-2020.
And what another good story it is. I'd like to move that Council authorise the Chief Executive Officer to enter a procurement agreement and contract with the Municipal Association of Victoria, recommended tenderer for retail supply of electricity to small tariff, large tariff sites and unmetered street lighting as outlined in MAV EC 8310-2020.
Understand you'd like to second that, Councillor By?
Yes, I'll second that, Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor McCubbin.
Yes, well, because of the ongoing use of PV on people's roofs, the energy prices have come right down. And Council, through the strength of the MAV, and I'd like to thank them for their assistance along the way, have negotiated an incredible thing, actually. The prices have come right down, so we've been able to save money on our electricity and as I said, create stability as well. So well done to everybody concerned, and well done. Really, really good.
And I'd like to announce then, Councillor McCubbin, that the Council award the large site facilities tender to the MAV preferred tenderer ERM Power for the following contract periods: Disraeli Street 12 months, Wellington Centre 12 months, the Wedge 12 months, remaining large sites/facilities 48 months, and unmetered street lighting for 48 months, and the Council award the small sites facilities tender to the MAV preferred tendered Origin Energy for the recommended contract period of 36 months. And if we could move on to item C4.3, McMillan Street East Special Charge Street Construction Scheme, Declaration of Scheme. Councillor Ripper.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that 1. Council, having considered that no submissions were received and no objections were lodged, and having complied with the requirements of sections 163A, 163B and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, the Act, and otherwise according to law, and having, so far as can be ascertained from available records and can reasonably be concluded, ascertained that McMillan Street, East Stratford Street, or any component of the street has not previously been constructed by way of special rate or charge. Hereby proceeds to declare a special charge scheme under section 163(1) of the Act scheme in accordance with declaration of a special charge declaration attached to and forming a part of this report. Such declaration being for the purposes of constructing the street and providing all and any ancillary works including underground drainage and vehicle crossings. I would like to have paragraph 2, 3 and 4 as read.
Thank you, Councillor Ripper. I understand you want to second that, Councillor Hole.
Thank you, Mayor. Yep.
Thank you. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Ripper?
Thank you, Mayor. McMillan Street in Stratford is located within the residential area of Stratford. Currently, the road east of Davis Street consists of a formed but unsealed gravel pavement of approximately 6 metres in width, 310 metres in length with irregular table drains. The road is primarily a rural type road, and when sealed will be a lot better road. It will eliminate dust, it will enhance the amenities in the area, the creation of improved riding service. For those bicycle riders in Stratford who are always out and about seeing what's happening in the town and enjoying looking at all the wonderful improvements in town. And improved of the drainage, and it will improve the access and egress for property owners. A win-win situation for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. Moving on to item C 4.4, Guthrie's Parade South Special Charge Street Construction Scheme, the declaration of scheme. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Ben. I'd like to move that Council, having considered that no submissions were received and no objections were lodged, and having complied with the requirements of sections 163A, 163B and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, the Act, and otherwise according to law, and having so far as can be ascertained from available records and can reasonably be concluded, ascertained that Guthrie's Parade South, Sale, which is the street, or any component of the street has not previously been constructed by way of a special rate of charge, hereby proceeds to declare a special charge scheme under section 1631 of the Act scheme in accordance with the declaration of a special charge declaration attached to and forming a part of this report. Such declaration being for the purposes of constructing the street and providing all and any ancillary works, including underground drainage and vehicle crossings. And if I could take number 2, 3 and 4 as read.
Yeah, I understand you'd like to speak on this, Councillor McCubbin.
Absolutely love to. Be a great project. Well done to people concerned.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Mayor. This is an important piece of road to get updated. It's actually the last section of Guthrie's Parade. It runs from Montgomery Street through to Stephen Street to be fully updated. It's a 450 metre stretch of road, and it's great to see that 83% of the residents supported this scheme. It's very important for connectability. Stevenson's Park has 2 entries off this road that is going to be upgraded. It's our most used sporting facility in the Wellington Shire, and it will form a great update to have accessibility. Also, there'll be extra parking made along Guthrie's Parade, which will aid those sporting precincts. So a great result for the community.
Thanks, Councillor Bye. Moving on to item C 5.1, Gordon Street Recreation Reserve Committee of Management minutes. Councillor Hole.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to move the Council receive the minutes from the Gordon Street Recreation Reserve Committee of Management's general meeting held on the 27th of April 2020.
Second to Councillor Ripper, I believe. Councillor Ripper.
I do apologise. Yes, I would like to second that motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Hole.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 3 or 4 things to come out of it. We've talked for 12 or 18 months in relation to a new mower being urgently needed, and through the scientific efficiency and judgment, economic judgment of Councillor Bye, the Reserve Committee now has his new mower and is keeping the President out on the ground mowing. The big leaky dam that was causing serious problems to the reserve and to the people who live below it has now been thoroughly repaired. And just the other day, you would have seen it was announced that the Vintage Engine Group were successful in getting a $20,000 grant to build a shed on their facilities where they run their 3-day program and draws about 4,000 to 5,000 people into the town. So yes, it's all good reports.
Thanks, Councillor Hole. CEO, any urgent business?
Sorry, Mayor. No, it's unmuting. None, Mayor.
Is there any further gallery or chat room comments to be considered?
Just bear with me for 2 seconds, Mayor. I'll just check one last time. No, none, Mayor.
Thank you, CEO. Given that...
sorry, I apologise, Mayor. There is one, and I nearly lost it in all the excitement of earlier on. Mayor, we did receive a comment from a Di Daly, and her comment was, how is it fair on a business such as myself that you're giving other businesses in council buildings a rent-free period? I think this refers to the some of the rent relief we've given to one or two of our commercial tenants during the COVID period. She then goes on to say, I've been closed for 2 months, how will you help me? So, Mayor, we'll draft up a response under your signature and provide that to Di within the next week.
Thank you, CEO. Happy to move on, and I think at this point, Councillor Stevens, would you like to move us into closed session?
Oh, would I? Okay, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
It's been a long night.
Beg pardon?
It's been a long night.
It has. Yes, well, I haven't even got the wording in front of me. I apologise.
I'm happy to move it.
H. You move it, Councillor Rossetti, because I haven't got the wording ready.
I move that the meeting be closed to public pursuant to Section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider, and it's going to be personnel matters.
Yep. Isn't there a second of that?
I'll second that.
Since opposed, so we've now moved into closed